Achilles was born as Prince of Phthia, son to King Peleus and sea goddess Thetis. But at birth came a prophecy. Either live a glorious life, but rather a short one, or live a long but forgetful life, away from fame. Thetis, desperate to shield him from fate, focused all her efforts on making sure this prophecy wouldn't be fulfilled, so she dipped Achilles in the river Styx in an attempt to make him immortal, holding him from his heel, his only untouched and therefore only vulnerable point. It was an act of love that would define both his greatness and his doom. After Achilles' birth, he wasn't raised like any prince. When Thetis realized what fate had prepared for her son of war and potential death, she did what any worried mother would do. She sought out the most skilled mentor and trainer in all of Greece, Chiron. Chiron was an immortal centaur. While centaurs are known to be vulgar and reckless, Chiron was wise, calm, and scholarly. He had trained many heroes, including the likes of Hercules. But his training program for Achilles was designed to make him into the greatest warrior to walk the earth, and Achilles was proved to be Chiron's greatest student. Achilles' training took place in the mountains of Mount Pelion, where under the guidance of Chiron he learned the art of warfare from swordsmanship and archery to spear-throwing. But if you think that's the end of his training, you would be mistaken, as Achilles learned medicine using healing herbs and first aid so that he could be ready for any battle scenarios. In addition to medicine and warfare, Chiron taught Achilles music and poetry for the preparation of discipline and a noble mind. He also learned hunting and survival to train his reflexes, instincts, and endurance. But the most important lesson that Chiron taught him was ethics, the value of honor, and the burden that comes with being a hero. These lessons were not just physical, but also emotional and philosophical. Achilles was raised knowing he was meant for greatness and trained by the wise Chiron. Achilles wasn't just shaped into a warrior, he was crafted into a legend. Even as a boy, Achilles stood out, faster, stronger, and more disciplined than any of his peers. Tales say that he could outrun a deer and wrestle lions. And by the time he reached his teen years, his name was already spoken of amongst the greats of Greece. But no matter his speed, no one will ever outrun his destiny, and war would soon call his name. The seeds of the Trojan War were not planted on earth, but on Mount Olympus. It all began with the wedding of Peleus, Achilles' father, and Thetis, a sea nymph. To celebrate their divine union, the gods of Olympus gathered for a feast unlike any other. But someone was missing. One goddess was not invited. Eris, the goddess of discord. She was known not for power or beauty, but for chaos. Where Eris walked, unity fractured. And on that day, she arrived anyway, uninvited. In revenge, Eris threw a golden apple into the feast of the wedding inscribed with the words, "To be the fairest," in order to spread a little chaos among the guests. 3 goddesses claimed it: Hera, the queen of gods, Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, and Aphrodite, the goddess of love. They turned to Zeus to settle the matter. But Zeus, wise enough to avoid such a perilous choice, refused to judge beauty among goddesses. Instead, he chose a mortal to decide. Far from Olympus, in the city of Troy, there lived a young prince named Paris, son of King Priam, brother to Hector. Charming, handsome, but not a warrior. Paris was known more for his elegance than his sword. He had once been abandoned as a baby. An oracle warned he would bring ruin to Troy. But fate had brought him back. Now he was chosen by the gods to judge divine beauty. Similar to people on earth, when they want to influence someone's decision, the 3 goddesses bribed him: Hera with power and kingship, Athena with wisdom and victory in battle, but Aphrodite, graceful and seductive, offered him what no kingdom or army could buy: the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris didn't hesitate. He gave the golden apple to Aphrodite. He had chosen love, but love came with consequences. The woman Aphrodite had promised him was Helen, queen of Sparta, the daughter of Zeus and Leda, wife to Menelaus, king of Sparta. But that didn't stop Paris from sailing to Sparta to claim his lover promised to him by Aphrodite, and he succeeded in his quest and brought Helen back with him to Troy. Outraged, and rightfully so, Menelaus called upon the kings of Greece to honour their oath, to defend Helen's marriage. The result was a coalition of Greek forces, including the legendary Odysseus and Agamemnon, launching war on Troy in an attempt to bring her back. Hearing of the war, Thetis remembered the prophecy. Achilles would die young if he went to war. Desperate to save her son, she disguised Achilles as a girl and hid him on the island of Skyros, where he lived among the king's daughters and dressed in girl clothes, and went by the name of Pyrrha, which meant red-haired. But the Greeks knew they needed a warrior like Achilles to have a chance of victory, so Odysseus plotted a clever plan to find Achilles. He went to the island of Skyros, disguised as a merchant, bringing the king's daughters' clothes, jewellery, and cosmetics. But hidden among the merchandise were weapons, a sword, a shield, and a spear. Then he faked a commotion. Some say sounded a war trumpet, others claim he faked an ambush. That's where the warrior instinct of Achilles kicked in. He grabbed the weapons, preparing for a fight. His warrior spirit exposed him, and he accepted his fate, leaving Skyros and joined the Greeks in their expedition to Troy, setting the stage for the rise to legendary status. Joining the Greek army in the Trojan War, Achilles couldn't come alone. At his side marched a group of elite warriors, the Myrmidons, not only known for their strength in combat, but for their absolute loyalty to Achilles. According to legends, they were created by Zeus himself, transforming them from a colony of ants into fierce human warriors to populate the island of Aegina after the plague. As the war dragged on, and with the ferocity of battle, the tensions didn't only rise between Greeks and the Trojans, but also erupted within the Greek camp. The leader of the whole Greek army was Agamemnon, brother of Menelaus and king of Mycenae. Although Achilles was their greatest warrior, Agamemnon was the commander-in-chief, and that created a conflict between pride and power. After a major victory against a Trojan town, as per custom, the Greeks took war prizes. Among them were two beautiful women, Briseis, given to Achilles, and Chryseis, given to Agamemnon. But Chryseis was the daughter to a priest of Apollo, and he demanded her return, and Agamemnon refused. So, as punishment, Apollo struck the camp with a plague. Forced to give up his reward, Chryseis, Agamemnon was enraged, and in retaliation he took Briseis from Achilles, insulting him in front of the whole army. For Achilles, it wasn't just about losing someone he cared for. It was a blow to his honour and a public humiliation. He was rightfully furious and feeling disrespected. He did the unthinkable and withdrew from the battlefield. He stayed in his tent while the war went on, and the Trojans started gaining ground when he refused to fight, even as many Greek heroes begged him to. Everyone knew the Greeks were weaker without him and couldn't stand a chance, but his pride didn't let him fight for a king who disrespected him. This moment has shown a different side of Achilles, one who's not just a warrior, but a man with values and personal pain. His absence was deeply felt, and it would eventually lead to a devastating consequence. Achilles' absence was more than silence. It was a void on the battlefield. The Greek leaders pleaded him to return, offering gold, power, and even Briseis back, but Achilles still refused. There was only one man whom Achilles listened to, his closest companion and his moral compass, Patroclus. More than a friend, Patroclus was a brother in arms, and perhaps the only person who could reach Achilles' heart. Seeing the Greeks fall, Patroclus made a desperate request. "If you will not fight, let me go in your place. Let me wear your armour. Let me lead the Myrmidons." Achilles agreed reluctantly, but instructed Patroclus, "Drive them back from the ships, but go no further. Do not face Hector." In the battlefield, disguised as Achilles, Patroclus burned with purpose. He drove the Trojans back, pushing them beyond the limits Achilles had set, until he came face to face with Hector, Prince of Troy. Patroclus fell. When the news reached Achilles, his world stopped spinning. He was inconsolable, and rage consumed him, not just at Hector, but at himself for letting this happen. His pride had cost him his dearest companion, and with that, Achilles was no longer the same man. He returned to the war, not for glory, but for Agamemnon, and not for Greece. He returned for vengeance. This was no longer a story of a warrior seeking fame, but a story of a broken man fueled by love, grief, and rage. When Achilles came back, he was unstoppable. His armour gleamed with fire, forged anew by the god Hephaestus. His wrath tore through the lines of the Trojan army, who fled before him, terrified at his sight. But one man stood his ground, Hector. Hector had killed Patroclus and now waited outside the gates of Troy to face the consequences. That moment was bound to happen from the beginning of the war. Both men knew this. For Achilles, this was vengeance. For Hector, it was honour, and for family and homeland. But when the two warriors came face to face, even a great warrior and prince of Troy, Hector felt fear and tried to run from this face-off. Achilles chased him 3 times around the walls of Troy, till Hector finally accepted his destiny. What happened after was swift and brutal. Achilles, fueled by rage and vengeance for his companion, struck down Hector with merciless precision, stabbing him through the neck with a spear. But death wasn't enough. Achilles tied his body to his chariot and dragged him around the battlefield. To the Greeks it was vengeance and victory. To the Trojans it was a tragedy. To the gods it was too far. For days Achilles refused to return Hector's body for a proper burial. But then something shifted. Priam, the king of Troy, and Hector's father made a dangerous trip to the Greek camp. Unarmed and alone, he knelt before the man who killed his son. He kissed his hand, begging him for mercy, the same hand that had taken Hector's life. Something broke inside Achilles. He was once a grieving friend, too. In that moment, Achilles remembered his humanity and gave Hector's body to Priam, and for the first time in a long while, the wrath faded. Though he avenged his friend and buried his fury, Achilles' destiny was unfolding before him, and the prophecy still lingered. He would die young, but his name would live forever. After Hector's death, the Greeks continued their siege of Troy, but were not yet victorious. Achilles fought with unmatched fury, even slaying Memnon, king of the Ethiopians, a Trojan ally. The gods grew uneasy watching Achilles. He became too powerful, fearless, and too close to defying fate. It was Paris, the one who started all this by taking Helen, who would bring the legend to an end. With the help of Apollo, the god of archery and sunlight, Paris fired an arrow during a Trojan counterattack, guided by God's hand. The arrow struck the only vulnerable part of Achilles, his heel, the very spot his mother had held him from when she dipped him in the river Styx as a child. The arrow pierced his flesh. Achilles, the nearly immortal warrior, feared by all armies and gods, fell. The Greeks mourned the loss of their greatest warrior. His body was carried back to camp, and he was given a hero's funeral. Achilles had always known that he had 2 choices, and he chose. He became a symbol of pride and power, vengeance and honour, humanity and love, and the tragic cost of greatness. Even today we speak of Achilles' heel, but now we know the full story. In death, Achilles became what no sword will ever be able to destroy: a legend.